You'll miss sweetheart. Women always do." He said it loud, proud, made sure the whole room heard it. Claire Maddox didn't answer, didn't turn around, didn't even blink. She loaded 5 rounds into her rifle the way a surgeon picks up a scalpel. No hesitation, no performance, no wasted motion. Just hands that remembered exactly what they were doing and had never once forgotten. The room laughed. They had no idea what they were laughing at. They had no idea that the quiet middle-aged woman standing at lane 7 had once made kills in 4 countries that no official record would ever confirm. They were about to find out. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel and follow Claire's journey all the way to the end. Drop a comment right now and tell us what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The Jacksonville civilian shooting range on a Tuesday morning was the kind of place where men came to feel large. They brought their newest gear, their loudest opinions, their stories about what they would have done in a firefight they'd never been anywhere near. The range smelled like gunpowder and ego in equal measure, and the sound of shots cracking through the air gave everyone present the comfortable illusion that they were in some important way warriors. Claire Maddox had been coming here for 3 months. She always chose the far lane, always paid cash, always arrived before the crowd, and left before anyone started asking questions. She carried an old OD green rifle case that had a cracked zipper along the top seam and a faded military duffel bag that had seen too many flights through too many countries that didn't appear on any public map. She wore a plain gray hoodie, worn jeans, and boots that had been resoled twice. She was 51 years old. She had gray threading through dark hair she kept pulled back without ceremony. There were lines around her eyes that had nothing to do with laughter. She moved through the world the way certain animals move through a forest, not slowly, not quickly, just with a kind of unconscious economy that most people never develop because most people never have to. Nobody paid much attention to her. That was the point. Rick Mercer noticed her the moment she walked in. He was midway through a lecture to a group of 6 students, 4 men in their 30s, 2 younger guys who looked barely old enough to vote, when Claire pushed through the door, set her case on the bench, and began unzipping it without looking around at anyone. Rick paused his sentence. He was 6'2", 220, and he carried himself like a man who had been told his whole life that his size was an achievement. He'd done 4 years in the Marine Corps infantry, separated as a corporal after a knee injury, and had spent the 15 years since turning that stint into a full professional identity. He ran the civilian instruction program at the range 3 days a week. He had certificates on the wall. He had regulars who admired him. He had a voice built for large rooms. He watched Claire for a moment, just long enough to take inventory and reach a conclusion. Too old. Too small. That rifle case looked ancient. She hadn't even looked at him when she came in, which meant she either didn't know who he was or didn't care. Either way, it bothered him. He leaned toward one of his students, a guy named Davis, who laughed at everything and said it just low enough that the others could still hear, "Watch this." Then he raised his voice across the room. "Hey there, sweetheart. You sure you've got the right place?" Claire didn't look up from her case. "Looks like it," she said. Her voice was flat and unbothered, which was somehow worse than if she'd sounded nervous. Rick smiled. "We run a live fire range here, not knitting class." He let his students absorb the joke. Davis laughed first, then the others followed the way they always did. "You might want to check if there's a yoga studio down the street." Claire finished unzipping her case. She lifted the rifle out of it with both hands, checking the chamber out of pure reflex, then set it on the bench with the barrel pointed safely downrange. "I'll manage," she said. And that was it. No glare, no sharp comeback, no visible irritation at all, which somehow made Rick feel worse about himself, and the feeling made him do what he always did when he felt worse about himself. He escalated. Mini-climax number 1. "What branch were you?" Rick called, over arms folded, performing for his audience. "Or were you one of those weekend warrior types? Took a 4-hour course somewhere And figured that made you an operator? Claire paused very slightly, just a fraction of a second. Then she continued setting up. Does it matter? She said. Kind of does around here, Rick said. He stepped back so his students had a clear line of sight to the exchange. He was staging it now. This was part of the lesson. We like to know who we're sharing a lane with. Safety reasons. I'm safe, Claire said. You know what? Rick said, walking toward her bench, now crossing the floor with his big, confident stride. I'm going to have to ask you to demonstrate that before I can let you shoot alongside my class. Range policy. There was no such policy. Every person in that room knew there was no such policy. Claire looked up at him for the first time. She held his eyes for exactly 3 seconds, which was long enough for something to pass between them that he couldn't quite name, some quality in her gaze that didn't fit the package, like finding an industrial lock on a garden shed. Then she looked back down at her rifle. Fine, she said. She put on her ear protection. She took a single breath. And she fired one round downrange at the 100-yard target. The round hit the center ring. Not the edge of the center of the center. Rick squinted. He walked toward the viewing scope, made a show of looking through it, then turned back to his students with a carefully neutral expression. Lucky shot, he said. Sure, Claire said. She ejected the casing and set the rifle down. Tell you what, sweetheart. Rick crossed his arms again. His voice went up a register, performing now for the small crowd that had started drifting toward them from other benches, drawn by the noise of a confrontation the way people always are. Let's make this interesting. 5 rounds, 100 yards. You and me head to head. Whoever groups tighter wins. Wins what? Rick reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded bill. He held it up. $100. Claire looked at the bill. She looked at him. I'm not here for a contest, she said. Come on. Rick spread his hands wide. What are you afraid of? Either you can shoot or you can't. Prove it. I don't have anything to prove to you. She's scared, Davis said from behind Rick, and the handful of people who'd gathered gave an uncertain, low-grade chuckle. Claire was quiet for a moment. Mini climax. Number 2. When she spoke, her voice was still calm, measured, but something in the register had shifted just slightly, like a dial, turning a single notch. Okay, she said. 5 rounds. Rick grinned. Now we're talking. You put the 100 down, Claire said, and I'll match it. She opened her duffel bag and produced a folded bill from the front pouch without hurrying. Rick took the bills and handed them to the range master, a quiet man in his 50s named Jerry, who had said absolutely nothing through this entire exchange, and now looked faintly uncomfortable holding $200 that he did not want to be responsible for. Ladies first, Rick said with a sweeping gesture toward her lane. Claire did not say thank you. She put her ear protection back on. She adjusted her position, not dramatically, not making a production of it, just small automatic adjustments the way a person's hands find their way to a familiar object in the dark. She checked her breathing once, glanced downrange, and then she fired. Tut! The first shot hit dead center. Rick's smile held. The second shot went through the same hole. The smile cracked a little at the edges. By the third shot, 2 of his students had walked to the viewing scope without being asked. By the fourth, the room had gone from low background chatter to near complete silence, the way rooms do when something is happening that no one has a category for yet. The 5th shot landed. One of Rick's students, the youngest, a kid named Tolly, who barely knew which end of a barrel to look through, walked to the scope, peered through it, and turned around with an expression on his face like he'd just seen something that rearranged his understanding of the world. It's 1 hole, Tolly said. What Rick said. It's 1 hole. 5 rounds, 1 hole. Mini climax. Number 3. Rick walked to the scope himself. He looked through it for a long time. long enough that everyone watching understood he was verifying and re-verifying what he was seeing, because what he was seeing didn't fit. He stepped back from the scope. He opened his mouth. He closed it again. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped out of the broadcast register entirely. It was quieter, more private than he intended. "Where did you train?" he said. Claire was already unloading her weapon with the same unhurried efficiency she did everything. She set it down on the bench. "I didn't train," she said. "I served." She picked up her duffel bag and walked toward the door. She had what she came for. 30 quiet minutes, 5 rounds, the familiar pull of the trigger. The specific silence that existed only in the half-second after a well-placed shot. She came here 3 times a week for that silence. It was the only silence that felt like the right shape. She was almost at the door when Rick found his voice again. "Hey!" Louder now. "Hey, I'm talking to you." She stopped. She didn't turn. "You can't just walk out. You haven't told us anything. Who you are, where you served, what unit." "That's correct," Claire said. She pushed through the door, and the room stayed exactly as silent as it had been since the 5th shot landed, except that now the silence had a different quality. Like everyone in it was privately revising something they'd believed before they walked in. Jerry the rangemaster looked down at the $200 in his hands. He walked to the counter and set it next to Claire's lane number, for her to pick up whenever she came back. Major twist, number 1, approximately 10 minutes in. What nobody in that building knew. Not Rick, not Jerry, not any of the students who would talk about that afternoon for years afterward, was what Claire did between leaving the range and returning to the small rented house 6 miles away where she had lived for the past 2 years. She sat in her truck in the parking lot for 17 minutes, both hands on the wheel. Engine off. She had not planned on shooting the contest. She had planned to absorb the mockery the way she absorbed everything now quietly at a distance, the way you treat incoming weather that you cannot change. She had been doing exactly that for 4 years, letting the noise of other people's assumptions wash over her without landing. She'd gotten very good at it. But something about the way Rick had said the word sweetheart had moved through her differently, not because it was worse than other things she'd been called. It wasn't. It was lazy and small, and he'd said it without even thinking about who he might be saying it to, which was its own kind of insult, the assumption that she required no real consideration before the joke landed. That was the part that had slipped through, the assumption that she required no consideration. She pressed her thumb against the edge of the steering wheel. 4 years, she thought. 4 years, and you still can't sit in a room without it finding you. She closed her eyes. And for a moment, just one, she was not in a parking lot outside a civilian range in Jacksonville. She was on a ridge in Kunar Province, and it was before dawn, and Nathan was 3 feet to her left, eating something terrible and cold out of a packet, and the world had a kind of terrible clarity that the world had not possessed for her since. She opened her eyes. She drove home. The house was spare and clean, in the way that suggested not minimalism, but the practiced habit of someone who had learned to own only what they could carry. 3 rooms, bookshelves with mostly paperback thrillers, and 1 shelf of things that were technical and dense and looked rarely opened. A small kitchen, a table with 2 chairs which seemed oddly optimistic for someone who lived alone. On the table was a cell phone with 7 missed calls, 3 of them from a number she did not recognize. 4 of them from a number she recognized very well and had been careful not to call back for the better part of a year. Nathan Cole. She put the phone face down on the table and went to make coffee. She knew with the specific certainty of someone who had spent many years reading the shape of situations before they fully revealed themselves that the calls were not nothing. Nathan didn't call 7 times for nothing. Nathan, in fact, barely called once for nothing. He was economical with contact the way people who had worked their entire lives in silence tended to be. 7 calls meant something had changed, or something was coming. She poured the coffee. She sat down. She picked up the phone. She called back the number she didn't recognize. It rang twice. A woman's voice answered, young, measured. "Is this Claire Maddox? Who's asking?" A half-beat pause. "My name is Sergeant Delgado. I'm out of Naval Station Mayport. I was asked to reach out to you by someone you served with. He said if you didn't answer his calls to try this number." "Nathan." "Yes, ma'am." Claire looked at the wall. "Tell Nathan," she said carefully, "that I'm not in anymore." "I know that, ma'am. He knows that. He said—" Another pause, shorter this time. "He said to tell you it's about the Ramos family." The name hit her the way certain names do not like a sound, but like a physical event. Her hand tightened around the phone, without her deciding to do that. "Which Ramos?" she said. "Corporal Daniel Ramos. Served with 2nd Recon 2011. His son is currently stationed at Camp Lejeune and his family." "I heard you," Claire said quietly. She set the coffee cup down. Mini climax. Number 4. She remembered Daniel Ramos with the kind of completeness that certain memories have, not a series of images, but a full-dimensional thing. She remembered the particular shape of the ridge they'd been on, and the exact angle of the wind, and the specific arithmetic of a shot she'd made that she had never written down, and that no one who had not been there would ever fully believe. Daniel Ramos had come home from that deployment, which meant his son had grown up, which meant something was happening to his son's family now. And Nathan was calling 7 times because Nathan believed she was the only person in a position to do something about it. That was the part that broke the surface of all the careful distance she had built. Not obligation, not guilt, not duty in the formal sense. Something older and more stubborn than all 3 of those things. She stood up from the table. "Where does Nathan want to meet?" she said. Mini climax number 5. 3 miles away. Rick Mercer was on his phone. He was sitting in his truck in the range parking lot he'd stayed after his class left because he couldn't make himself drive away yet, and he wasn't ready to examine why that was. "I need you to run a plate for me," he was saying. The person on the other end owed him a favor from a few years back, which made this legal question more comfortable to ignore. He read off the number he'd photographed on his way out the door. He told himself it was a simple question. He just wanted to know who she was, where she'd served. There was a reasonable explanation for what she'd done with those 5 shots. Some people were just naturally gifted. He'd encountered it before, and he would confirm that reasonable explanation, and then the afternoon would stop replaying itself in the back of his mind. He told himself all of that. "Get back to me when you can," he said, and ended the call. Then he sat in his truck for a while longer, staring out the windshield at nothing, listening to the particular quality of silence that follows a thing you cannot unsee. Mini climax number 6. Claire met Nathan at a diner on the edge of town that closed at 9 and never had more than 4 occupied tables. Nathan Cole was 53, lean in the way that people who maintained physical discipline into middle age are lean, not from youth, but from intention. He had a beard now, which he hadn't when she'd last seen him, and there was more gray in it than she would have expected. He was already seated when she arrived, and had already ordered 2 coffees, without asking which was the kind of thing that still felt like shorthand for a shared language she hadn't spoken in years. She sat down across from him. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Nathan said, "You look tired." "I'm always tired," Claire said. "You look older." "I am older." He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. "How's Jacksonville?" "Flat," she said. "Tell me about Ramos." Nathan let out a slow breath through his nose. "Eddie Ramos, Daniel's kid, 26, Corporal Force Recon, good Marine by all accounts. 8 months ago he reported something to his chain of command that he should not have reported to his chain of command." "What did he report?" "That 3 senior NCOs in his unit were running contract equipment off the books and selling access to civilian security firms operating in areas they had no business operating in." Claire was quiet. "The chain of command," Nathan said, "buried it." "Of course they did." Eddie kept pushing. 2 weeks ago, he was transferred to a paper assignment at Lejeune. Week after that, someone went through his wife's car. Not stolen, gone through. Like they were looking for something specific. Claire looked at him. Looking for what? We think Eddie made copies of documentation before the report got buried. We think somebody in the chain knows that. And we think they're going to keep applying pressure until either the documentation disappears or Eddie does. The diner was quiet except for the sound of a coffee maker cycling on somewhere in the kitchen. That's not my world anymore, Claire said. I know. I got out for a reason, Nathan. I know that too. Then why are you sitting across from me instead of someone who's still in? Nathan looked at her for a moment. He had the kind of eyes that had seen the same things hers had not damaged by them exactly, but permanently marked. Like wood that's been through water. Because Eddie's wife called Daniel, he said. And Daniel called the one person he said he trusted with his son's life. Silence. He said your name, Claire. Mini climax number 7. Claire looked down at the table. She had spent 4 years building careful distance between herself and exactly this kind of sentence. She had chosen Jacksonville because she didn't know anyone in Jacksonville. She had chosen the civilian range because it was anonymous. She had chosen a small house with a short lease and a life with no complicated commitments because she understood with the clarity that comes from having made different choices and watched them break that she was not currently capable of being the person she used to be, or so she'd believed. She picked up her coffee. "Tell me everything you know," she said. Nathan's expression shifted barely just around the eyes in a way that might have been relief. "There's more," he said. "There always is." The 3 NCOs. Eddie reported one of them has a connection to someone in naval intelligence. Someone mid-level. Someone who has the access to make things very quiet very fast if Eddie's documentation surfaces in the wrong way. You're saying it's not just a unit problem. I'm saying if Eddie tries to push this through official channels again, the documentation will disappear and so will Eddie's career. Possibly more than his career. Claire set the cup down. How long does he have before they make their next move? Our best estimate, Nathan said. 72 hours. Maybe less if they've already identified where the copies are. Mini climax number 8. Her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. She looked at it, then at Nathan. "You give this number to anyone else," she said. "No." She let it ring once more. Then she picked up. Silence on the line for 2 seconds. Then a young male voice tightly controlled, but not quite hiding the strain underneath. "Is this am I speaking to Senior Chief Maddox?" "Former," Claire said. A breath. "My dad told me to call you. He said..." The voice broke slightly, caught itself. "He said you were the only one who'd actually pick up." Claire looked at Nathan. Nathan nodded once. "Eddie," she said. "Where are you right now?" "My house. But I don't think I should stay here. Someone moved things in my wife's car that I know for a fact weren't moved before. My laptop bag was unzipped. I zipped it before I left and it was unzipped when I got home." "Is your wife there with you?" "She's at her sister's. I made her go this morning. I told her it was a precaution." It was the right call. Eddie listened to me carefully. Don't go anywhere. Don't call anyone in your chain of command. Don't access any of your accounts from a device that's been in that house in the last week. They're going to bury this, Eddie said. The control was fraying now. "I have everything. I have dates. I have amounts. I have emails that should not exist. And they're going to bury it, and bury me with it, and nobody." "Eddie." Her voice didn't rise. It just sharpened. "Stop. I need you to breathe and listen. Can you do that?" A pause. "Yes," he said. "Nobody is burying anything," Claire said. "I need you to hold for 72 hours. Can you do 72 hours? Another pause. Longer this time. "You're going to help me," he said. Not a question. like he was hearing something he needed to make real by saying it out loud. "I'm going to help you," Claire said. She looked at Nathan across the diner table. He was watching her with an expression she recognized, the particular look of someone who has been waiting for a specific person to finally come back to themselves. "Where's the documentation stored?" she said. Mini climax. Number 9. 3 miles away. Rick Mercer's phone rang. He answered on the first ring. "You get anything?" he said. The man on the other end was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had a quality that Rick had not been expecting. "Rick," the man said slowly, "where exactly did you say this woman was?" "The civilian range on Meadowbrook." "Why?" "Because the plate you gave me—" Another pause. "Rick, that vehicle is registered to a federal holding address." Rick sat up straighter. "What does that mean?" "It means whoever this woman is, her vehicle registration has been deliberately obscured. That's not something that just happens. That's something that someone with specific clearance arranges deliberately." Rick said nothing for a moment. His mouth had gone slightly dry. "What branch?" he said. "I couldn't get that far," the man said. "Rick, I need to tell you I stopped digging. Whatever rabbit hole this is, I don't want to be in it. I'd suggest you don't either." The call ended. Rick sat holding the phone in a room that felt for the first time in a very long time significantly larger than he was. Mini climax. Number 10. Back in the diner, Claire was writing nothing down. She never wrote anything down. She stored the relevant coordinates in the precise filing system behind her eyes that had once made her the most valuable asset in a classified reconnaissance unit operating in 4 countries with no public acknowledgement. She cataloged 1 sergeant with naval intelligence access, 3 NCOs running unauthorized contract operations. Documentation currently in a location she now knew. Eddie Ramos, 26 years old, son of Daniel Ramos, the corporal she had pulled off a ridge in Kunar province on a night that had no official record. 72 hours. "You said there was more," she said to Nathan. "The intelligence officer with the connection," Nathan said. He folded his hands on the table. "His name is Holloway, Commander Dale Holloway. He was at Naval Station Mayport 2 years ago." Claire was still. "He processed your separation paperwork," Nathan said quietly. She looked at him for a long moment. "He knows who I am," she said. "He knows who you were," Nathan said. "He may not know where you are." "He will soon," Claire said. "Rick Mercer ran my plate this afternoon." Nathan's eyes sharpened. "The instructor from the range? He's not going to find anything actionable," Claire said. "But the search itself will flag. And if Holloway is watching for flag patterns related to my name, then your window is shorter than 72 hours. "Yes," Claire said. She stood up from the table. She put on her jacket with the same efficient unhurriedness she did everything. "Then let's not waste it," she said. Nathan watched her walk out of the diner into the evening air. He sat for a moment with both coffee cups still on the table, both nearly full. Then he pulled out his own phone and made a call. "She's in," he said. On the other end, a man with a graveled voice and the long-held patience of someone who had been in impossible situations long enough to stop calling them impossible, simply said good. Nathan ended the call. He looked at the door Claire had walked through. For 4 years, he had watched her disappear into the carefully constructed quiet of her civilian life. He had watched her become a ghost of herself, not broken, not finished, but dimmed the way a fire is dimmed when there's nothing feeding it. And tonight, for the first time in 4 years, he had watched the light come back into her eyes. Not because someone had asked her to fight, because Daniel Ramos's son had called, and Claire Maddox did not abandon the children of the men she had saved. That was who she had always been. She was already in motion, and the people who had set this trap had no idea what was walking toward them. Claire drove with both hands on the wheel and her mind 3 steps ahead of the road. She had 72 hours, maybe less. The moment Rick Mercer's plate search flagged somewhere in the system, and it would flag. She had no doubt about that. Holloway would know the general vicinity. He might not know the address yet. He might not know the name she was using. But the search would confirm what he'd probably only suspected, that she was still in Florida, that she was moving around in daylight, that she was findable. She pulled over at a gas station, not for gas, and made 2 phone calls. The first was to Eddie. "You still at the house?" she said the moment he picked up. "Yes," you said. "I know what I said. I'm changing it. Get a bag. 30 minutes of clothes, nothing else. Your phone comes with you, but goes off the moment you're out the door. You use a burner from here until I tell you otherwise. Can you get to a burner tonight? There's a Walmart, 3 miles. Go there. Pay cash. Call me from the new number. Do not call anyone else. Not your wife, not your father, not anyone in uniform. You understand?" A short silence. Then, what changed? Nothing changed. I'm moving the timeline because I'd rather move early than explain why I didn't. "Okay," Eddie said. The word was small, but it carried something, the particular sound of a person handing the controls to someone else. Not because they'd given up. Because they'd finally found someone they trusted with the weight. 30 minutes, Eddie." She ended the call and made the second one. Nathan picked up before it finished ringing once. "Holloway's connection at Mayport," she said. "How deep is it? Does he have access to personnel location data?" "Not formally," Nathan said. "But formally has never been the point with Holloway. He has relationships with people who have access. It's the same thing with extra steps. Then assume he can find me inside of 48 hours if he's looking. Which means we have less than that before he changes his approach with Eddie. What do you need? I need everything you have on the 3 NCOs. Names, ranks, current assignments, and anything that connects them to Holloway in writing. Emails, travel vouchers, anything with a date and a signature." "I can get most of that by morning." "Get it by midnight," Claire said. "And Nathan, the documentation Eddie has. He told me he made 3 copies. 1 physical, 2 digital. The physical one is in a safety deposit box at a bank in Jacksonville. The digital copies, he emailed one to himself using an account that isn't his name," Nathan said. Claire paused. "He told you that?" "He told me just now. He called me right after he got off with you. Claire, he's 26 years old, and he's scared, and he's alone in a house where someone's been through his things. He's going to keep reaching out to people he trusts." "I know," she said. "That's what worries me. Every call he makes is a thread someone can pull." She pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose. "What's the email account name?" "He wouldn't tell me." "Good. At least he's keeping one thing tight." She sat for a moment, engine idling. "The 3rd copy. He said 3. Physical first, digital second, digital. Where's the 3rd? Nathan was quiet for 2 seconds. That was 1 second too long. "Nathan, he gave a physical copy to someone else," Nathan said carefully. "Before he called either of us. Someone he trusted from his unit before the transfer." "Who?" "A lance corporal named Torres. Woman. She was in his original unit before the whole thing blew up. She's at Pendleton now." "Does she know what she's holding?" "He told her it was personal financial records she was safekeeping in case something happened to him." "So she doesn't know the actual value of what she has?" "No. And Holloway doesn't know she exists." "Not yet." Claire made a decision in the space of a single breath. "Torres stays in the dark. We don't contact her. We don't move the copy she's holding. The moment we reach toward her, we create a trail that leads right to her." "Agreed," Nathan said. "I'll call you at midnight," she said, and ended the call before he could answer. She pulled back onto the road. She had 3 moves, and they all had to happen in the right sequence. She thought about Rick Mercer for exactly 4 seconds, the plate search, the flag. It would generate the question of whether he would keep pulling, and then she put him in a separate compartment in her mind and sealed it. Rick Mercer was a variable. She'd deal with variables when they moved. Right now she had constants to address. She drove. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, the second, unknown number in one evening. She let it ring 3 times before picking up. "Maddox," said the voice on the other end, and the specific texture of the word, clipped, certain carrying the casual authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, told her everything before the next sentence arrived. "You've been hard to find," the voice said. "Took me longer than it should have." She didn't respond. "I know you know who this is," the voice said. "We processed your separation paperwork together. You signed 17 forms, and you didn't look at me once. I always remembered that." "Holloway," she said. "There she is." A small sound that might have been satisfaction. "I heard you had an interesting afternoon at the range. Word travels." Her hand tightened on the phone. He already knew. The flag had moved faster than she'd calculated, which meant either his access ran deeper than Nathan had assessed, or someone at the range had made a call she hadn't predicted. "What do you want?" she said. "I want to have a straightforward conversation," Holloway said. "That's all. I have no interest in complicating your life, Claire. You built yourself something quiet down there. I respect that. A person earns the right to quiet. Get to the point." A brief pause. "There's a young man making some very unfortunate choices right now. He's a good Marine by all accounts. Loyal, motivated. He's just found himself caught up in a situation that's bigger than he understands, and the people involved have interests that go considerably higher than his rank would suggest. And you want me to do what exactly?" "I want you to let it resolve itself," Holloway said. "I want you to stay in your lane, your very comfortable, very quiet civilian lane, and let the people who understand the full picture manage a situation that you have one very narrow view of." "You're calling to warn me off." "I'm calling to have a conversation between two professionals," he said smoothly. "You know how these things work. What the young man found isn't what he thinks it is. There are layers to an operation like this that a corporal at his level cannot parse. And the people he's put at risk by going to his chain of command are not just NCOs with questionable ethics. They're assets, Claire. Active assets with ongoing value." She heard what he wasn't saying underneath what he was saying. "You're not just protecting the 3 NCOs, she said. "The contract work they were doing that was authorized at your level. Maybe above your level." And Eddie Ramos found the edge of something he wasn't supposed to see. Silence. Not a comfortable silence. The kind that confirms the shape of what you've just said by refusing to deny it. "You're smarter than your file suggests," Holloway said quietly. And then when she didn't respond, "Walk away from this, Maddox. I have no desire to see your record complicated by involvement in something you don't fully understand. Your service was exceptional. It deserves to stay that way." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm protecting you," he said. "There's a difference." "There isn't," she said. "Not when you're the one making the call." She ended it. She drove for 30 seconds in complete silence processing. Then she called Nathan. He picked up instantly. "Holloway just called me directly," she said. Nathan said nothing for a moment. Then, "How?" "He's faster than we thought and deeper than you assessed. The NCOs aren't rogue. The operation they were running was sanctioned from above. Holloway's not protecting dirty Marines. He's protecting an active intelligence operation that those Marines were used to cover. Claire, which means Eddie's documentation isn't just evidence of contract fraud," she said. "It's evidence of an unauthorized operation running through legitimate military infrastructure. That's not a JAG problem. That's a Senate Oversight Committee problem." Nathan's breathing on the line was the only sound for 3 full seconds. "If that's true," he said slowly, "then Holloway can't just bury the documentation. He has to make it so it never surfaces. Period. Which means Eddie isn't a loose end they're managing," Claire said. "He's a problem they intend to eliminate." The word hung in the air between them with terrible weight. "How long?" Nathan said. "He called me to buy time," she said. "Which means he's already moving. We have hours, Nathan, not days." She heard Nathan pull in a breath. "What do you need me to do?" "I need Torres's full name unit and contact at Pendleton, not to reach her to protect her. If Holloway traces Eddie's connections, she's going to be on the list." "I'll have it in 20 minutes." And I need you to make one more call. Someone still inside with actual reach. Not a favor, someone who would want to know that an active intelligence operation is running through Marine Corps infrastructure without proper oversight. You're talking about going around the chain. The chain is the problem, Claire said. We go around it. Another pause. Then Nathan said, I know someone. She's IG, Department of Defense. She's careful, and she's real, and she does not owe anyone favors. Can she move fast? If the documentation is what you're describing. Yes. Then get me in front of her, Claire said. Tonight, if possible. Tomorrow morning at the absolute latest. Claire. His voice shifted, quieter. You understand what you're stepping into. This isn't a contested shooting range. These are people with real reach who have already decided this is worth protecting at significant cost. I know, she said, and you're still doing it. Daniel Ramos came home, she said simply. His son made it 26 years and got into uniform and did the right thing when he saw something wrong. And now somebody in a suit wants to end that story quietly. She paused. That's not happening on my watch. Not while I can still do something about it. Nathan didn't say anything for a moment. Then, I'll make the call. She ended the call and drove with the particular focused calm of someone who has reduced a situation to its essential components and made her peace with each one. She was not unafraid. Fear was not the issue. She had spent more than a decade operating in conditions where fear was a piece of data you noted and set aside while you did the work. This was the work. Her burner buzzed Eddie calling from the new number. I'm out, he said. I've got the phone. I'm 3 blocks from the house I paid cash. Good. Where's the physical documentation, the safety deposit box? First National on Beach Boulevard. Box number 447. The key is... He stopped. Eddie, where is the key? A sharp exhale. It's in the house, in the kitchen drawer, under the contact paper. Is there anyone you trust absolutely not in uniform, not connected to your unit, who can go to that house and get the key before you go back? My neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski. She's 73, she has a spare house key, she feeds our cat when we travel. She doesn't know anything about any of this. She doesn't need to. Call her. Tell her you forgot something in the kitchen, and you need her to grab it. Give her the exact location. Have her leave it somewhere outside mailbox under the mat, and you pick it up without going inside. Okay. His voice was steadier now. Movement helped. Purpose helped. She knew that from experience. The moment you had a task, the fear had somewhere to go. Where do I go after? There's a motel on Phillips Highway called the Crossroads Inn. Pay cash. Use a fake name. Nothing creative, just a name that isn't yours. Call me when you're in the room. And then what? Then you sit tight and you don't do anything else until I contact you. And you're going to... He stopped himself. She could feel him choosing his words. What are you doing while I'm sitting tight? I'm making sure that what you did reporting what you saw, doing the right thing, even after they told you to stop, I'm making sure it means something, she said. He didn't say anything for a moment. My dad said you saved his life, Eddie said. He never told me how. Just that there was a woman, and she made a shot nobody else could make, and he came home because of it. Claire watched the road. He came home because he was good at his job, she said. I just made sure he got the chance to keep doing it. He said you'd say something like that? Go to Mrs. Kowalski, Eddie. Get the key. Get to the motel. Call me when you're in. She ended the call. She drove for another minute before she let herself think about Daniel Ramos. Not the operation, not the ridge, not the tactical calculation of the shot. Just the man. The way he'd looked at her afterward in the dark, not with awe, the way some of them did, but with a kind of quiet recognition, like two people meeting unexpectedly in a room they both had reason to be in. He'd sent his son a message through a phone call and a name. That was the whole of what he could do from where he was now. A phone call and a name. And his son had called the name, and the name had answered. She pulled into the motel parking lot where she herself was staying, different motel, same logic cash, and a name that wasn't hers, and sat in the truck for a moment. Her phone rang. "Nathan, I got Torres's information," he said immediately. "And I made the other call, the IG contact. Her name is Supervisory Special Agent Dana Whitfield. She'll meet us tomorrow at 6 a.m. at a location she'll send to this number in the next hour. She'll move on what Eddie has." She said, and I'm quoting, "If the documentation holds the operation he's describing is a violation of 3 separate federal statutes, and I need it on my desk yesterday." So yes, she'll move. "Good," Claire said. "What about Torres?" "She's on base at Pendleton. She's currently not aware of any threat. I've got a contact at Pendleton. Retired Master Sergeant owes me a significant favor, who can make sure an unofficial eye stays on her routine for the next 48 hours. Not official. Nothing official. Just a friendly set of eyes." "Good." Claire rubbed one hand across her jaw. "And the NCOs, the 3 of them. You said you'd have information by midnight." "I've got it now," Nathan said. "Names are Sergeant First Class Briggs, Staff Sergeant Okafor, and Gunnery Sergeant DeLuca. Briggs and Okafor are both currently on post at Lejeune. DeLuca transferred to Pendleton 8 months ago." Claire straightened. "Pendleton," she said. "Yes." "Same base as Torres." Nathan's silence lasted exactly 1 second. "Oh," he said. "DeLuca didn't transfer because of a routine rotation," Claire said. "He transferred because Eddie's documentation includes materials that could implicate him specifically, and Torres is the only person holding a physical copy that Holloway doesn't know about. DeLuca is there to find it. He may not know it's Torres specifically. He doesn't need to. He just needs to work backwards through Eddie's known contacts until he gets there." She felt the timeline compress inside her chest. "Call your contact at Pendleton back. Upgrade the surveillance, and tell him if DeLuca approaches Torres for any reason at all, any reason I need to know about it within the minute." "Done," Nathan said. "Claire, this is getting wide fast. Holloway 3 NCOs in 2 different locations, a DOD-IG, contact an active timeline." "I know. You've been out of this for 4 years." "I know that too." "And you're not concerned." She thought about the shooting range, about the 5 shots, and the 1 hole, and the room going silent, about the way the rifle had fit back into her hands, like it had never left. "I'm concerned about Eddie," she said. "I'm concerned about Torres. I'm concerned about the documentation reaching Whitfield before Holloway neutralizes it." She paused. "I'm not concerned about my end of it." Nathan made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "No," he said. "I didn't think you were." "Midnight," she said. "Check in." She ended the call and got out of the truck. She had 4 hours before the situation would either crystallize or collapse, and she intended to use every minute of them. She'd slept less than this on worse nights. She'd operated with less information, fewer resources, and no one waiting on the other end of a phone. What she hadn't had on those nights was this specific combination of factors. A young Marine's career on one side, and active intelligence abuse on the other, and a connection between them that passed through the name of a man she had pulled off a ridge 18 years ago in a country that still showed up in her dreams. That was the difference. That was why she was not in her small house with the 2 chairs sitting across from an empty seat and a fading civilian life. She was here, in motion, eyes forward, and 3 miles away, in a room at the Crossroads Inn on Phillips Highway. Eddie Ramos sat on the edge of a motel bed holding a key he'd gotten from a 73-year-old neighbor, looking at a burner phone and trusting someone his father had told him about exactly once. His father had not told him what she looked like. He hadn't described her rank or her record or the specific mechanics of what she had done. He had only said one thing: "If it ever gets bad enough that you don't know what to do, call her. She'll know." And the thing was sitting in that motel room with his whole career detonating in slow motion around him. Eddie Ramos found that he believed it. He didn't know why. He just did. And sometimes that was enough to get through the night. The call came at 2:47 in the morning. Not Nathan, not Eddie. It was the contact at Pendleton, the retired Master Sergeant Nathan had posted as an unofficial eye on Torres. His name was Garza, and when he spoke, his voice had the flat, stripped-down quality of a man reporting something he wished he wasn't reporting. DeLuca made contact, Garza said. 20 minutes ago. He approached Torres at the barracks common area, casual, acted like they were old acquaintances running into each other. Are they? Claire said. She was already sitting up, already reaching for her jacket. Negative. Torres transferred to Pendleton 4 months after DeLuca. They've never served in the same unit. He introduced himself like they had history. She looked confused, but she didn't walk away because he outranks her, and she's 23 years old, and she doesn't know yet that she should walk away. What did they talk about? I couldn't get close enough for audio. They talked for 6 minutes. Torres went back inside. DeLuca made a phone call immediately after. To who? Unknown, but the call lasted less than a minute, which means it was a report, not a conversation. Claire was already moving. Did Torres give him anything? Hand him anything? Did he touch her bag or her gear at any point? Negative on all. But Claire, he knows she exists now. He walked away from that conversation with something, even if it was just confirmation that she's the right person. How did he find her? Garza paused. That's the part I don't like. Tell me, someone accessed Eddie Ramos's personnel file through an internal system in the last 6 hours. Not Holloway's credentials, a different set. Someone lower in the chain who has database access and isn't careful enough about their digital footprint. They pulled Eddie's service record and his known associates within the Corps. Torres is listed because they were in the same platoon before the transfer. Claire absorbed this. Which means Holloway didn't find Torres himself. He delegated the search, which means there's at least one more person inside the system working this. At minimum, Garza said. You want me to pull Torres out of there? No. If she disappears tonight, DeLuca reports it and Holloway knows the documentation is in play. She stays. You stay close. If DeLuca approaches her again before 0800 hours, you insert yourself, old friend of her uncle, something low-key, and you buy her time. Claire thought for 3 seconds. And Garza does Torres have a personal cell? Affirmative. Get me the number. He gave it to her. She memorized it without writing it down. Don't tell her I'm going to call, Claire said. And don't tell her why. She ended the call and immediately dialed Nathan. He picked up on the second ring, which told her he hadn't been sleeping either. DeLuca found Torres, she said. How fast? Fast enough that we have a problem. There's a second actor inside the personnel system. Holloway is running this with more infrastructure than you told me he had. Claire, I gave you everything I could verify. I know. I'm not blaming you. I'm updating the picture. She moved through the dark room. The meeting with Whitfield, 6 a.m. Is it locked in? She confirmed the location an hour ago, a federal building on Water Street. She'll have 2 of her own people there. Whitfield's people, are they cleared to receive classified adjacent material without triggering an automatic report to the chain? She said she'd handle the intake classification herself. Nothing goes up the chain until she's reviewed it. She understands that if it goes up the wrong chain before she's reviewed it, the documentation disappears and the whole thing dies. She said, and again, I'm quoting, I've been doing this for 19 years, Mr. Cole. I understand the concept of discretion. Despite everything, the corner of Claire's mouth moved. I like her already. You'll like her more when you meet her. She's the kind of person who got into oversight work because the word oversight actually means something to her. A pause. What do you need from me right now? I need you to conference Eddie into this call. He needs to hear the update and he needs to make a decision. Give me 90 seconds. She waited. The line clicked twice. Then Eddie's voice came on tired alert, in the way that fear makes you alert the specific exhaustion of someone who has been lying in the dark with their eyes open. I'm here, Eddie said. Eddie, the physical documentation with Torres is compromised. Not the copy itself, she hasn't been touched, but DeLuca found her, and he's going to keep pressing until he confirms whether she has something. We have hours before that situation forces a decision neither of us wants to make. What kind of decision? Eddie said carefully. The kind where we either move the documentation before DeLuca gets to it, or we let it sit and hope he doesn't move faster than we can manage. If we move it, he knows it existed. He may already know. Eddie was quiet for a moment. Then, Torres doesn't know what she's holding. I told her it was personal papers. If DeLuca presses her, and she tells him about a manila envelope I asked her to keep. She doesn't know what's in it, Claire said. But she knows you gave it to her, and right now that's the thread DeLuca is going to pull. Another silence. Claire let it sit. She didn't fill silences with reassurance. Eddie needed to think, not be managed. What if Torres is already scared? He said finally. She's 23. She's never dealt with anything like this. If a gunnery sergeant approaches her again and starts asking specific questions, then she answers honestly because she doesn't know there's a reason not to, Claire said. Which is why I'm going to call her in the next 20 minutes and give her a reason. You're going to tell her the truth. I'm going to tell her enough of it that she knows to stall and to call me if DeLuca comes back. The rest of the truth she doesn't need to carry. Not yet. Eddie exhaled. Okay. Then, the digital copies. The email account Holloway mentioned in the call to you that he was aware I had documentation. Does he know about the email account? Nathan answered before Claire could. Unknown. He knows documentation exists. Whether he's traced the specific backup method is something we can't confirm without access to his operations. He hasn't moved to lock down your email accounts yet, Claire said. That tells me he either doesn't know the specific account or he's not ready to show his hand by triggering account-level access. Either way, we don't touch the account until we're in front of Whitfield. If we access it now, we create a login event that someone watching might catch. So we just leave it. We leave it. It's safer sitting still than moving. And the safety deposit box. The key is in my jacket pocket. That's the cleanest copy, Claire said. Original documents, original format. Nothing that's passed through a digital system. That's what Whitfield is going to want in her hand. That's what we protect above everything else. How do we get it to her? You and I walk into that bank together when it opens at 9. You access the box. We take the documents directly to Whitfield. She paused. Can you do that? Yes, Eddie said, immediately. No hesitation, which told her everything she needed to know about the kind of Marine he was. Nathan, Claire said. You're at the meeting with Whitfield at 6. You brief her on the full picture before Eddie and I arrive. She needs to understand what she's walking into before the documentation is in her hands. Understood. Nathan's voice had the cadence of someone already running the checklist in his head. Claire, one more thing. Holloway's call to you. He has your number. That means he can track the cell. I know. Are you going to switch to a burner? If I switch, he knows I know he's tracking. Right now, I'd rather let him think he has eyes on me while I move. And when you stop being useful as a decoy, then I switch, she said simply. She ended the conference and sat for a moment in the specific silence of a situation that had fully clarified itself. There was a kind of relief in that, in the moment, when all the variables collapsed into a single set of necessary actions. She'd lived most of her operational life in that space. It wasn't comfortable, but it was clean. She dialed Torres. It rang 4 times. Then a young woman's voice, groggy and suddenly alarmed the way you are when your phone rings at 3 in the morning. Hello. Lance Corporal Torres. My name isn't important right now. What is important is that you listen to me for the next 2 minutes and then decide whether you trust what I'm telling you. A beat of silence. Who is this? Someone Eddie Ramos asked to look out for you. You know Eddie? Another beat. Shorter this time. Yeah, I know Eddie. The envelope he asked you to keep for him. Do you still have it? She heard Torres's breathing change the shift from sleepy confusion to something more careful. What envelope? Torres said. Claire felt a flicker of something close to approval. The instinct to deny first and ask questions second was either training or good judgment, and Torres had it. The one he gave you before he transferred, Claire said. The one he said was personal papers. Torres, I need you to trust me for 60 seconds. Eddie is safe. He's going to stay safe, but a gunnery sergeant named DeLuca approached you earlier tonight for a reason, and it wasn't because he's friendly." Silence on the line, long enough that Claire gave her the space. "He said he knew Eddie from before," Torres said slowly. "Said he was checking in on Eddie's friends since the transfer. He was looking for the envelope." The silence this time was a different kind. "What's in it?" Torres said quietly. "Documentation that could end careers," Claire said. "Not Eddie's career. The careers of people who don't want it to exist. And that's all I can tell you right now, because the less you know, the safer you are." "I'm already not safe if DeLuca doesn't know you have it," Claire said. "He suspects it. There's a difference. As long as he can't confirm it, you're a dead end to him. Which means if he comes back, you act confused. You act like the envelope Eddie gave you contained exactly what he said. It contained some personal papers, savings account stuff, nothing interesting. You act like you barely remember it. And if he pushes, you call me, immediately, this number." Another silence. "Eddie trusts you," Torres said. "His father does. Eddie's working on it." She heard Torres breathe out slowly. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Where's the envelope right now?" "My footlocker. Under my PT gear." "Leave it there. Don't move it. Don't look at it. Don't tell anyone you have it. If you move it before I tell you to, you create exactly the kind of visible action that confirms to DeLuca he has the right person." "Understood," Torres said. Clipped. Military. She'd made her decision, and she was done deliberating. "What's your name?" "You don't need it yet," Claire said. "Sleep if you can. And Torres, you're doing the right thing. So is Eddie. I know that doesn't make it feel smaller right now, but it's true." She ended the call. She checked the time. 4 hours and 12 minutes until the Whitfield meeting. 6 hours and 40 minutes until the bank opened. She knew she should try to sleep. She also knew she wasn't going to. She was in the truck and moving before she'd consciously decided to move, which was the way decisions had always worked for her. At the operational level, not resolved, just executed. The body, trusting the mind, had already done the math. She drove to a 24-hour diner and ordered coffee she didn't need, and a breakfast she ate methodically because fuel was fuel and she was going to need it. She sat in a corner booth with her back to the wall and her eyes on the door, and she went through the entire sequence in her head. Every person, every piece of documentation, every possible countermove, the way she used to run through mission parameters the night before an operation. The coffee was terrible. She drank 3 cups. At 4:15 her phone rang. Not Nathan, not Eddie, not Torres, not Garza. It was a local number she didn't recognize. She let it ring once more, then answered. "Maddox," said Rick Mercer. She was quiet for 1 full second. "You tracked this number," she said. "I had your plate traced," he said. The number was attached to the same federal holding address as the plate. "It took me—" He stopped. Recalibrated. "Look, I don't know what I stepped into this afternoon. I made a call to someone who ran your plate, and he called me back telling me to drop it, which is the first time in 15 years that guy has ever told me to drop anything." "Then you should have dropped it." "I know." He paused. "I know that. I'm not calling to cause trouble. I'm calling because I did something stupid this afternoon, and I need to know if it put you in a bad position. The plate search, if it flagged something somewhere that you didn't want flagged." "It did," Claire said. The silence on his end had a specific quality. Genuine discomfort. The kind that belongs to a person who has just fully absorbed the weight of a consequence they caused. "I'm sorry," he said. It was not the word she'd expected. "It already happened," she said. "It can't be unflagged. Is there something I can do?" He said it plainly without performance. The bravado from the range was entirely gone, and what was underneath it was something closer to a man who was genuinely asking because he genuinely wanted to fix something. Claire considered. There were exactly 2 things Rick Mercer could be right now: a variable she managed or a resource she used. The second option required trust she hadn't built with him. But trust in the field was often built on need rather than history. "Can you keep your mouth shut about this phone call?" she said. "Yes." "About the plate search, the callback, you got all of it?" "Yes." "Then that's what you can do." She paused. "Ann Mercer, the shooting this afternoon. The reason you called to have my plate run. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." "Go ahead." "Was it about the shooting, or was it about the fact that you didn't know who I was?" A long pause. "Both," he said. "Mostly the second one." Another pause. "I've been doing this, the instruction, the range, the whole thing for a long time. And I've built it on knowing who belongs in the room. Today I didn't know. And that bothered me more than it should have." "That's an honest answer," she said. "I'm capable of them occasionally." She almost said something close to a laugh. Almost. "Go home, Mercer," she said. "And if anyone calls you asking about a woman at the range today, you never saw anything worth mentioning." "Understood." He paused one last time. "For what it's worth, what you did with those 5 shots. I've been teaching firearms for 15 years. I've never seen anyone do what you did." "Lots of people can shoot," Claire said. "Not like that." She ended the call. She sat with the coffee cup for a moment. Thought about Rick Mercer, the ego, the performance, the noise, and then the call at 4 in the morning. No audience, no performance. Just a man trying to correct something he'd gotten wrong. She'd seen worse apologies from people with much better reasons to make them. She filed him away and moved forward. At 5:40, she was parked 2 blocks from the federal building on Water Street, watching the street with the patient, still attention of someone who spent years learning to distinguish between activity that mattered and activity that didn't. At 5:57, she sent Nathan a single text. "Anything unusual on your approach?" He replied. "Clean. Whitfield is already inside." She got out of the truck. The federal building smelled like every federal building recycled air floor wax, the particular sterility of government infrastructure maintained on insufficient budget. A security guard checked her ID without interest. She took the elevator to the 4th floor. Whitfield met her in the hallway. She was 50-something, compact, wearing clothes that were professional without being formal. She had dark eyes that moved through the world with permanent, comfortable assessment, the eyes of someone who spent her career looking at what people tried to hide. She didn't extend her hand. "Senior Chief Maddox," she said. "Former," Claire said. "I know." Whitfield looked at her for a moment, the way a person looks at something they've heard a lot about, and are now calibrating against reality. "Nathan told me what you've been managing since yesterday evening. I want to tell you for the record that you should not have had to manage any of it." Somebody had to. Yes, and the fact that somebody turned out to be a retired operator working alone, rather than an institutional process functioning the way it's supposed to, is an indictment of the institution. Whitfield said this without heat, which made it worse. "Come inside." They sat across from each other at a conference table with Nathan to Claire's left, and 2 of Whitfield's people, both in their 30s, both very still, both clearly experienced enough to already understand the shape of what they were about to hear at the far end. Claire laid it out. Clean, sequential, no editorializing. Holloway. The 3 NCOs. The operation running through legitimate military infrastructure without proper oversight. Eddie's documentation. Torres. DeLuca. The timeline. Whitfield listened without interrupting once. When Claire finished, Whitfield folded her hands on the table. "The documentation in the safety deposit box. You have the key." "Eddie has the key. He'll be here with me at 09:30 after the bank opens." "And the digital copies, the email account." "Untouched. Login would create a trackable event." "Correct." Whitfield looked at one of her people. "We'll access that through a secure government terminal with appropriate logging that won't flag externally." She turned back to Claire. "The connection between Holloway and the operation itself, do you have anything that places him in the chain of authorization, emails, travel records? Anything that isn't Eddie's word?" "That's what we're hoping is in the safety deposit box," Claire said. "Eddie was thorough. He held nothing back when he compiled the original report. And the chain of command buried that report. Within 72 hours of receiving it. Whitfield was quiet for a moment. Something moved behind her eyes. Not surprise exactly, but the particular heaviness of someone who has seen institutional failure often enough to stop being shocked by it and hasn't yet stopped being hurt by it. "I'm going to make some calls this morning," she said. "Before Eddie arrives. I want to understand the scope of what Holloway has access to so we can contain the blast radius when this moves." She looked directly at Claire. "And it is going to move. I want you to understand that. Once Eddie's documentation is in my possession, this doesn't pause. I cannot offer you a quiet option." "I don't want a quiet option," Claire said. Whitfield studied her for a moment. "No," she said. "I didn't think you would." The meeting broke at 6:45. Nathan walked out with Claire. In the hallway, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know Holloway is going to know something happened this morning." "Yes. He's going to trace the meeting location. Federal building pre-dawn. He has the resources." "He'll know we went to IG," Claire said. "Which means he's going to accelerate whatever his backup plan is." "Which is what exactly?" "Discrediting Eddie before the documentation reaches anyone who can act on it." She pulled on her jacket. "He's going to surface something, a performance issue, a conduct flag, something in Eddie's record that makes him look unstable or unreliable. He'll try to get ahead of the documentation by poisoning the source." Nathan nodded slowly. "That's the move." "It's the only move he has left," Claire said. "Which means between now and 09:30, someone is going to call Eddie and try to convince him to back down, or threaten him directly, or both." "Should we warn him?" "I already have," she said. She hadn't. Not yet. But she would before she got back in the truck. Because that was the thing about this specific kind of fight, the kind where the enemy wore the same uniform as the people you were protecting. You couldn't win it by being louder. You couldn't win it by being angrier. You could only win it by being more prepared, more precise, and more committed to the outcome than the other side was committed to preventing it. And Holloway, for all his access and his infrastructure and his 19 years of navigating institutional politics, had made one significant miscalculation. He had called Claire to warn her off. He thought that warning her was the same as stopping her. He was wrong. And somewhere in the next 4 hours, he was going to find out exactly how wrong. She called Eddie from the truck before she'd driven 1 block from the federal building. He picked up on the first ring. "How'd it go?" he said. "Whitfield is credible and she's moving," Claire said. "We meet her at 09:30 with the documentation. But Eddie, listen to me. Between now and then, someone is going to try to get to you." Define get to me. Holloway's last card is your credibility. If he can surface something, a conduct record, a psych flag, anything that makes you look unstable before the documentation lands on Whitfield's desk, he creates enough doubt to slow the process. Maybe enough to stop it entirely. Silence. Then quietly, "There's nothing in my record. I know that. You know that. Holloway knows that too, which means whatever he surfaces won't be real. It'll be manufactured. A complaint from a superior, a disciplinary note that didn't exist before last night." She kept her voice level. "Or he goes simpler. He calls you directly, offers you something. A reassignment, a promotion recommendation, a guarantee that your career survives if you walk away." "I'm not walking away. I know you're not. I'm telling you so that when the call comes, you're ready for it and you don't let it shake you. They're going to try to make you feel alone and out of options. That's a tactic, not a fact. You understand the difference?" "Yes," Eddie said. "Stay in the motel. Don't open the door for anyone you didn't invite. I'll call you at 08:30 with a meeting point before the bank. We go in together, we come out together, and we go straight to Whitfield. Understood?" A pause. "Claire, my wife. I told her it was a precaution. She's been texting me all night on the burner number I gave her before I left. She doesn't know how bad it actually is." "What do you want to tell her?" Another pause. Longer. "The truth," he said. "I don't want to protect her from it anymore. She's tougher than I've been giving her credit for." "Then call her. Claire said. "Tell her exactly as much as you want to and nothing more. But Eddie makes sure she stays at her sister's. No matter what she hears today, she stays there until I tell you it's clear." "She's going to want to come back." "I know, she doesn't." "Okay," he said. The word was small, but the weight behind it was enormous. A man balancing the instinct to protect his family against the knowledge that the protection they needed right now looked nothing like what he could physically provide. That was its own kind of courage, and Claire recognized it the way she recognized all things she'd felt herself. "You're doing the right thing, Eddie," she said. "I know it doesn't feel like it from inside it." "No," he said. "It doesn't." She ended the call. She had 2 hours and 45 minutes. She used the first 20 of them to sit in a parking lot and think through every angle she hadn't addressed yet. The second actor in the personnel system, whoever had run the database search that led DeLuca to Torres. Holloway's backup plan. The manufactured record, if that was the route he chose. Whether Whitfield had enough institutional authority to contain the fallout before Holloway's connections triggered a counter-response. Then her phone rang, and Garza's number appeared on the screen, and her stomach dropped exactly 1 inch before she answered. "DeLuca moved," Garza said. "When?" 40 minutes ago. He went to the barracks CO and reported that Lance Corporal Torres was in possession of unauthorized materials belonging to a service member under investigation. The word investigation hit like a stone dropped into still water. "Eddie's under formal investigation," Claire said. "As of this morning. Conduct unbecoming. Initiated at 0530 by Staff Sergeant Okafor at Lejeune, signed off by a colonel whose name I don't recognize, and neither does anyone I've called." She closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Holloway hadn't waited. He'd moved before the sun came up. He'd spent the night arranging the pieces and executed the moment he knew she'd been to the Federal Building, which meant his surveillance on her was better than she'd built into any of her calculations. "He knew about the Whitfield meeting," she said. "He had eyes on the building." "Or on your phone," Garza said. "The call logs. Don't say anything else on this line," Claire said. She ended the call. She sat for 3 seconds. Then she made a decision she'd been resisting since Nathan first mentioned it, pulled the battery from her primary cell and picked up the burner from the seat beside her. She called Nathan from the burner. He answered on the second ring. "New number," she said. "Write it down. And Nathan, assume my primary line has been monitored since Holloway's call last night. Anything I said on it in the last 8 hours, assume he has." A sharp exhale. "How bad?" "He initiated a formal investigation against Eddie. Conduct unbecoming signed off at Lejeune before dawn. And he told the Pendleton CO that Torres is holding unauthorized materials tied to the investigation. He's using the official process as a weapon. The moment the barracks CO acts on that report, Torres's copy gets seized as evidence in a military investigation, and Holloway's people control the chain of custody." Which means it disappears," Claire said. "The same way Eddie's original report disappeared. Inside the official process where he controls the intake." Nathan was quiet for 2 seconds. "The safety deposit box. If Eddie is formally under investigation, does that give them grounds to—" "Not without a court order and a specific address," Claire said. "They don't know which bank. They don't know the box number. That copy is still clean." She gripped the steering wheel. "But Torres, we have to move the Pendleton copy before the barracks CO acts on DeLuca's report." Garza can't be the one to move it. The moment he touches it, he's interfering with a military investigation, and Holloway has another target. Claire thought fast the way she used to think fast on a ridge with incoming and a window closing. Torres has to move it herself, voluntarily, before the CO issues a formal directive to her. Can she do that without making it look like she's hiding evidence? She doesn't hide it. She transfers it. There's a difference. She was already working through the sequence. If Torres walks the envelope to a designated federal oversight contact, not military chain federal oversight, before a military directive reaches her, she hasn't interfered with anything. She's voluntarily cooperating with a parallel federal inquiry. You need Whitfield to establish Torres as a federal contact in the next— Nathan paused. Claire, it's 07:15. I know what time it is. Whitfield needs to issue a formal request to Torres before the Pendleton CO receives and acts on DeLuca's report. That's a 2-hour window at most. Then call Whitfield right now, Claire said. From a clean line. Tell her exactly what I just told you. She needs to issue a protective contact request to Torres at Pendleton Official Federal Oversight Inquiry, voluntary cooperation requested. The moment that document lands on the Pendleton CO's desk, Torres's cooperation is federal business, and the military investigation can't touch the materials she's holding without Whitfield's sign-off. That's Claire. That's the kind of procedural move that takes days normally. Tell Whitfield that normally is not available today. Nathan said nothing for 1 second. I'll call her right now. Call me back on this number. And Nathan, hurry. She set the burner on the seat and drove. She drove not toward anything specific, but because movement helped her think, and right now she needed to think about the thing she'd been putting off thinking about since Garza's call, which was this: Holloway had moved at 05:30. He'd had the investigation paperwork ready before that, which meant he hadn't spent the night trying to warn her off. He'd spent the night building the apparatus to destroy Eddie's credibility, and the call to her had been the thing he did while he waited for the paperwork to process. He hadn't been warning her. He'd been buying himself time, which meant he was a better tactician than she'd given him credit for, and she was going to need to stop underestimating him right now. The burner rang. Whitfield is moving, Nathan said. She's issuing the federal contact request directly to the Pendleton Commanding General's office, not the barracks CO above him. The moment it's received, Torres is under federal protection as a voluntary cooperating witness. How long? Whitfield said 45 minutes if the CG's office is answering. She's calling ahead to make sure they're answering. And Torres? Does she know what's coming? Whitfield's assistant is calling her right now, on base extension, making it official and documented from the federal side. Good. Claire let out a slow breath. That buys us the window. If the CG acts on the federal request before the barracks, CO acts on DeLuca's report, the chain of custody for Torres's copy belongs to Whitfield. That's the play, Nathan said. It's thin, but it's clean. Thin and clean is all we need. She turned onto a main road. What about the manufactured investigation against Eddie conduct unbecoming? That's going to follow him regardless of what Whitfield secures today. Whitfield said when the underlying documentation is confirmed, the predicate investigation collapses. A conduct charge initiated hours before a federal oversight inquiry goes active, built on a report from a superior who is himself a subject of the inquiry. Nathan paused. She said it'll be vacated. She used a word I won't repeat, but the meaning was that it falls apart on contact. She said that confidently. She said it the way she says everything, like she's done this before and she knows exactly where it ends. For the first time since 2:47 in the morning, something in Claire's chest loosened by a fraction. Okay, she said. I need to brief Eddie on the investigation. He needs to hear it from me before he hears it from anyone else. I'll set up a three-way... No, I'll call him direct. She paused. And Nathan, the second actor in the personnel system, the one who ran Eddie's service record. Did you get anything? Working on it. I have a name that might fit a petty officer second class named Harmon assigned to Naval Station Mayport admin. He's been Holloway's personal admin assistant for 3 years. Harmon ran the search himself. If it's him, he used his own credentials, which is either arrogance or he didn't expect anyone to check the access logs. Either way, it's a traceable action. Get the access log documentation to Whitfield. If Harmon's credentials pulled Eddie's file, that's a direct connection between Holloway's office and the investigation's predicate. That's the thread that ties the whole thing to Holloway personally. Already pulling it, Nathan said. Give me an hour. You have 40 minutes, she said. She ended the call and immediately dialed Eddie on the burner. He picked up on the third ring, and she could hear from the texture of his voice that he'd already seen something. They opened an investigation against me, he said before she could speak. Conduct unbecoming. I got a notification through my military email. It came in at... Oh, 5:30, she said. I know. Eddie, listen. They're going to pull my record. They're going to... His voice was controlled, but the control was costing him. Claire, if this sticks my entire career, it's not going to stick. You can't know. Eddie. Her voice didn't rise, but it sharpened exactly enough. I need you to listen to me, and I need you to trust what I'm telling you for the next 60 seconds. Can you do that? A breath. Yes. The investigation is manufactured. It was built overnight specifically to discredit you before the documentation reaches Whitfield. The charge will not survive contact with the evidence we're delivering this morning. Not because I'm hoping it won't. Because the procedural predicate is garbage, and Whitfield already knows it. What if Whitfield can't move fast enough? What if... She's already moving. She's securing Torres's copy at Pendleton right now through a federal protective request. The safety deposit box is untouched. The email backup is untouched. The access log that connects Holloway's office directly to the search that started this whole chain that's going to Whitfield's desk in 40 minutes. Silence. They're scared, Claire said. Scared people make fast moves, and fast moves have fingerprints. Holloway moved so fast last night he made mistakes. That's what we're handing to Whitfield. Eddie was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had steadied. Okay, he said. Okay. Oh, 8:30. I'll call you with the meeting point. You still have the key. He patted something audible through the phone. Right here. Good. Stay in the room. She drove for 10 minutes before the burner rang again. Unknown number this time, not Nathan, not Garza, not anyone she'd given the new number to. She answered anyway. Word travels fast, said Holloway's voice. She said nothing. New number, he said. Burner, I'd guess. Smart. He didn't sound angry. He sounded calm in the specific way of a man who has already decided the conversation's outcome. I underestimated you, Maddox. I won't pretend otherwise. The federal contact request to Pendleton was a clean move. I didn't see it coming at the speed it came. Then we're done here, Claire said. We're not, actually. His voice shifted just fractionally. There's something you don't know, something I didn't mention on our first call because I wanted to see how far you'd go first. I'm not interested in things you've decided to tell me on your own timeline. You'll want to hear this one, he said. The operation Eddie stumbled into, the one running through the NCOs. It wasn't entirely unauthorized. Parts of it were. The contract diversion, the revenue stream that's Briggs and Okafor freelancing, and I'll grant you that's criminal. But the operational structure underneath it, the infrastructure they were using, that was authorized, classified, and it's still active. Claire kept her face neutral, even though no one could see her face. You're telling me there's a legitimate operation underneath the dirty one. I'm telling you that when Whitfield opens this box, she's going to find things that cannot be made public without compromising an ongoing intelligence collection effort that has direct national security value. A pause. I'm not asking you to protect me, Maddox. I'm telling you that what Eddie found is a thread, and if Whitfield pulls it all the way, what unravels isn't just 3 NCOs and 1 compromised commander. It's an 18-month collection program with assets who are still in the field. The silence between them lasted 5 full seconds. You're saying real people get hurt, Claire said. I'm saying real people die, Holloway said. If the operational details surface in a federal inquiry, even a classified one, the exposure risk to active assets is not theoretical. I've seen it happen. You've seen it happen. She had seen it happen. She knew exactly the shape of what he was describing and the specific weight it carried. That's why you've been trying to keep it quiet, she said slowly. Not just to protect yourself, to protect the active layer underneath. Briggs and Okafor got greedy and sloppy, and they built their operation on top of something real. And now a 26-year-old corporal with excellent instincts and terrible timing has found the edge of it and is about to hand it to a federal investigator who doesn't have the clearance to understand what she's looking at. Claire said nothing for a moment. Holloway's voice dropped lower. I need you to be the one who explains that to her. Not me, not anyone inside this, you. Because she'll believe you in a way she won't believe anyone wearing a uniform connected to this situation. You want me to walk into Whitfield's office and tell her to slow down. I want you to walk in and tell her to be careful, Holloway said. There's a difference. She can still prosecute Briggs Okafor and DeLuca. She can still clear Eddie's record. She can do all of it if she does it in a way that preserves the operational security of the layer underneath. And your role in the cover-up. A pause. I'll accept whatever accountability is appropriate. That's a very careful sentence. It's an honest one. Claire gripped the wheel. She thought about Nathan, about Whitfield's steady eyes across the conference table, about Eddie in a motel room holding a key to a box that might be more complicated than any of them had understood 24 hours ago. She thought about the ridge in Kunar province, about a shot she'd made in the dark that had no official record, about Daniel Ramos walking out of a country he should not have survived, and she thought about the fact that Holloway, for the first time in this entire conversation, sounded like a man telling the truth, which was the most dangerous thing he'd said yet. I'll talk to Whitfield, Claire said. She heard him exhale. But I decide what I tell her, Claire said, and when, and how. You don't coach it, you don't contact me again before the meeting, and you do not under any circumstances make another move against Eddie Ramos or Torres or anyone else connected to this while I'm having that conversation. If I find out you've moved while I'm in that room, the deal is dead, and I walk out and tell Whitfield everything, including this call. Understood, Holloway said. And Holloway. She let a beat pass. The active assets. If any part of what you just told me is manufactured if you used legitimate national security language to construct a story that protects yourself, I will find out. And you will not enjoy what comes after that. A longer pause this time. I know, he said. She ended the call. She pulled over. She sat for 2 full minutes doing nothing except processing. Then she called Nathan. I need you to do something for me before the 09:30 meeting, she said the moment he answered. Something quiet and fast, and I need it done before I walk into Whitfield's office. Tell me. The operational infrastructure the NCOs were using for their contract work. I need to know if there's a legitimate classified layer underneath it. A real program. Active assets. Nathan was quiet for 2 seconds. Holloway told you there was. He did. And you need to know if he's telling the truth. I need to know before I walk into that meeting. Because if he's telling the truth, the way we present Eddie's documentation changes. And if he's lying, the way we handle Holloway changes. Claire, that kind of verification? You know someone, she said. You've always known someone. That's why you're the person I called when this started. A long pause. Give me 30 minutes, Nathan said. You have 20. She sat in the truck and waited. 19 minutes later, Nathan called back. She answered before the ring finished. There's a program, Nathan said. His voice was careful, measured in the specific way of someone who has just learned something that changed the shape of everything. SIGINT collection 18 months old, running through a non-official cover structure in 3 countries, classified above secret. The NCO's network was being used as a logistical shell for part of it. Not all of it, just the financial movement layer. And if the financial movement layer becomes public through a federal inquiry, the analysts I reached said the exposure risk to active collection sources would be significant. Real, not hypothetical. Claire closed her eyes. There it was. Holloway wasn't lying. The dirty operation ran on top of something real. Briggs Okafor and DeLuca had been freelancing inside a classified structure which was criminal and would be prosecuted, but the structure itself was legitimate. And Eddie, in his thoroughness, had documented everything, including the parts that couldn't see daylight. Can Whitfield prosecute the criminal layer without surfacing the classified layer? Claire said. With the right handling? Yes. But it requires someone with full operational clearance to advise on what can and cannot be disclosed. Someone who can sit with Whitfield and her legal team and draw the line between what's criminal and what's classified. Someone like who? Nathan's answer came without hesitation, which told her he'd already been thinking about it. Someone like you, he said. She sat with that for a moment. 4 years ago, she had separated from the Navy with the specific intention of never being in another room where national security decisions were being made based on information she was carrying. She had found Jacksonville and the civilian range, and 3 Tuesday mornings a week of silence, and 5 rounds through a paper target, and a careful, quiet life built around the premise that she was done. She looked at her hands on the steering wheel. The same hands that had loaded 5 rounds yesterday morning in front of a laughing room. The same hands that still remembered every motion. "Set it up," she said. "I'll be in Whitfield's office before 0900. Make sure she knows I need 30 minutes with her before Eddie arrives. I'll call her now. Nathan." She paused. "Eddie's record, the conduct investigation, it gets cleared. That's non-negotiable regardless of what the classified layer requires." "Agreed." "And Torres is protected." "Agreed." "Then let's finish this," she said. She started the truck and drove toward the federal building and the 30 minutes she needed with Dana Whitfield before everything that came next. Behind her, somewhere in Jacksonville, Rick Mercer was at his range doing what he did every morning, setting up lanes, checking equipment, preparing for the day's instruction, and trying not to think about 5 shots through one hole, and a woman who had looked at him with those flat, steady eyes that had seen things he was never going to see. He'd made a call at 4 in the morning to apologize. He didn't know yet what that call had cost Holloway's surveillance operation a gap in the phone record, a timestamp that didn't match the location data, a small discrepancy that one of Whitfield's analysts would later find useful. He didn't know any of that. He just set up his lanes and thought about a woman who never raised her voice and never needed to. And somewhere in the back of his mind, without quite being able to articulate why he hoped she was okay, Whitfield listened to everything without moving. She sat across from Claire at the conference table, with both hands flat on the surface and her eyes steady, and she did not interrupt once. Not when Claire described the classified program underneath the criminal operation. Not when she explained the active assets, the exposure risk, the 18 months of collection work that would be compromised if the financial layer became public without surgical handling. Not when she said plainly that Holloway had told her all of this in a phone call at 0740 and that she believed him. When Claire finished, Whitfield was quiet for 10 full seconds. Then she said, "You believed him?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because a man protecting only himself uses different language than a man protecting something he actually values," Claire said. "He's been in long enough that the program means something to him. The cover-up he built around it was wrong and he knows it. But the thing underneath, he wasn't lying about that." Whitfield looked at her for a moment. "You're asking me to structure this prosecution in a way that preserves operational security on a classified layer you can't officially confirm exists. I'm telling you it exists. What you do with that is your call. It's not standard procedure." "Standard procedure buried Eddie's report the first time," Claire said. Whitfield's jaw tightened fractionally. "No, it didn't. People inside the procedure buried it. The procedure itself is only as good as the people running it," Claire said. "I know. That's why I'm in this room instead of someone else." A silence. Then Whitfield said, "I have the clearance to receive classified program information. I don't have the specific clearance level Nathan described for this program." "I know. Which means I need to bring in someone who does. Someone from the intelligence community side with the appropriate access who can sit with my legal team and draw the line between prosecutable criminal conduct and protected operational material." "How long does that take?" Whitfield looked at one of her people, the woman at the far end of the table who had been writing carefully the entire meeting. "Reyes, how long?" Reyes looked up. "If I call the right desk right now, 4 hours to get someone here with the right clearance. Maybe 3 if they understand the urgency." "They'll understand it," Whitfield said. She looked back at Claire. "The criminal prosecution of Briggs, Okafor, and DeLuca that proceeds regardless. Their personal freelancing on top of the classified structure is not protected by the structure. It's criminal on its own terms." "Agreed." Holloway's role in the cover-up, the suppression of Eddie's report, the manufactured investigation, the pressure on Torres. Also criminal, Claire said, regardless of his reasons. Yes. Whitfield's voice was precise. His reasons don't erase the conduct, they context it. The sentencing conversation is different from the prosecution conversation. That's your call to make, Claire said, not mine. Whitfield studied her. You're not here to protect him. I'm here to protect the people underneath him who had nothing to do with what he did, Claire said. And I'm here to make sure Eddie Ramos's documentation lands in hands that know what to do with it. It will, Whitfield said. Not a promise. A statement of fact delivered with the weight of 19 years behind it. She stood, extended her hand across the table. Claire took it. Eddie arrives at 09:30, Claire said. I'll be here, Whitfield said. Claire was almost to the door when Whitfield spoke again. Senior Chief Maddox. She turned. What you've done in the last 18 hours, Whitfield said carefully. Operating without institutional support, without backup, without any formal authority. You did it because a young Marine needed someone, and you were the someone available. She paused. I want you to know that I see that, and I want you to know that it matters. Claire held her gaze for a moment. Make sure his record gets cleared, she said. That's what matters. She walked out. In the hallway, Nathan was waiting with 2 cups of coffee, one of which he handed to her without a word, which was exactly what she needed him to do. They walked to the elevator in silence and wrote it down, and stood in the building lobby with 10 minutes before they needed to move. How'd she take it? Nathan said. Like a professional, Claire said. She needs a cleared intelligence liaison to separate the layers. 4 hours. Can Eddie wait 4 hours? He doesn't have to wait. The documentation goes in this morning. The classification review happens after intake. The prosecution timeline is Whitfield's. She drank the coffee. His record gets cleared today. That was the condition. Nathan nodded slowly. And Holloway. He told me the truth about the program. He still covered up a federal report and manufactured a conduct investigation and applied pressure to an active duty service member. He answers for that. She paused. What he gets in exchange for telling the truth about the program is Whitfield knowing there was a reason, not that the reason was acceptable. That's a fine line. Most lines worth drawing are. Nathan looked at her for a moment. How are you doing? I'm fine. Claire. I said I'm fine, Nathan. I know what you said. He turned to face her. You've been running at full operational tempo for 22 hours on 3 cups of bad diner coffee and whatever you had for breakfast. You made decisions last night that most people would have needed a team and a week to reach, and you did all of it 4 years after telling me you were finished. He looked at her steadily. So I'm asking again, how are you doing? She looked at the lobby floor for a moment. I forgot, she said quietly. What it feels like to be useful in a way that actually counts. She looked up. That's not nothing. Nathan didn't say anything. He just nodded once the way people nod when they hear something they've been waiting a long time to hear. Eddie was already waiting outside when they came through the door. He was in civilian clothes, the key in his jacket pocket, his eyes carrying the specific exhaustion of someone who had not slept and had not allowed themselves to fall apart. He was younger looking than she'd expected from the phone calls. Something about his face still had the quality of a person who had not yet become fully accustomed to being the one responsible for things. He looked at her and said nothing for a moment. Then, "You're shorter than I expected. Your father said the same thing," she said. "Come on." They walked together to the bank 3 blocks away, Eddie on her left, Nathan on her right. Nobody spoke much. There was a specific quality to the silence between people moving toward a necessary thing, not comfortable, not uncomfortable, just focused. At the bank, Eddie signed in at the desk and produced his ID and followed the attendant to the vault. Claire waited at the entrance. 3 minutes later, Eddie walked out holding a large manila envelope that was thicker than she'd expected, sealed at the top with tape that had been applied carefully and deliberately by someone who understood that it might matter that it was unopened. He handed it to her. She didn't open it. She held it the way you hold something that cost someone a great deal. That's everything, Eddie said. Every email, every voucher, every date and dollar amount. I went back 3 years on the contract records and cross-referenced every discrepancy I could find. He paused. I know some of it goes deeper than just Briggs and Okafor. I know, Claire said. Is it going to be a problem? Whitfield's handling it, she said. Trust her. He looked at her for a moment. I trust you, he said. And you trust her, so. She almost smiled. Come on. They went back to the federal building, and Whitfield received the envelope, personally signed the intake documentation in front of all three of them, and handed a copy of the intake receipt to Eddie, with both hands. The way you hand something to a person you want to acknowledge has done a hard thing. Corporal Ramos, she said. The conduct investigation against you will be formally vacated by end of business today. I'm signing the order in the next hour. Eddie looked at the receipt in his hands for a moment. Something moved across his face. Not relief exactly, more like the careful, slow release of something he'd been holding so tightly for so long that letting go of it felt strange. Thank you, he said. Thank her, Whitfield said, and nodded at Claire. She's the one who made sure this happened in the right sequence. Eddie looked at Claire. Claire looked at the wall. Let's go, she said. They walked out into the morning air. Nathan had his phone to his ear immediately, already moving into the next piece of what needed to happen. Garza would need to be briefed. Torres would need to know she was clear. The Pendleton CO would receive a formal notification from Whitfield's office before noon. Eddie stood on the sidewalk holding the intake receipt and not quite knowing what to do with his hands. It's over, he said. The hard part is over, Claire said. There's going to be a formal process. Depositions, probably. Whitfield's people will need you for statements. That part takes time, and it isn't comfortable. But it's process. You can survive process. What about Holloway? He'll be contacted today, Claire said. What he does with that contact is his choice to make. Eddie nodded slowly. Then he looked at her with the directness of someone who has decided to say the thing they've been holding back. My dad called me last night, he said. After I talked to you the first time. I didn't tell you because I didn't think it was relevant. But he told me about Kunar, the ridge, the shot. He paused. He said he never knew your name until I told him I was calling you. All these years he just called you the woman who brought him home. Claire was quiet. He said to tell you something, Eddie said. He said tell her the shot wasn't what saved me. She saved me before she pulled the trigger. She saved me because she was still on that ridge when she didn't have to be. The morning was bright, and the city moved around them the way cities do, indifferent and constant, and Claire stood on the sidewalk and let that sentence land without moving away from it. She had been on that ridge because the mission required it. She had stayed past the required moment because Daniel Ramos was not yet out, and she did not leave people in the field. That was the rule. That had always been the rule. She had never thought of it as saving him twice. Tell him, she said carefully, that I'm glad he made it home. Eddie nodded. He looked like he had more to say, and made the decision not to say it, which was its own kind of maturity. He shook Nathan's hand, then turned to Claire. He didn't extend his hand. He stood at attention. Full, correct military attention. Heels together. Eyes forward, the kind of posture that meant something specific to the people who knew what it cost. Claire looked at him for a moment. Then she said, At ease, Corporal. He relaxed, but his eyes didn't change. Thank you, he said, for answering the phone. She watched him go, and for a long moment after he turned the corner, she stood on the sidewalk with Nathan beside her, saying nothing, which was the right thing for him to do. Then her burner rang. Garza. Torres is clear, he said the moment she answered. Whitfield's protective order hit the CG's desk at 0847. The barracks, CO, never issued the directive to Torres. DeLuca's report got overtaken by a federal inquiry before it could be acted on. A pause. DeLuca has been notified that he's a subject of a federal investigation. He went very quiet very fast. Good, Claire said. Briggs and Okafor at Lejeune were contacted an hour ago by Whitfield's field team. Both lawyered up immediately. Another pause. Holloway called Whitfield's office at 09:30, voluntarily, asked to cooperate. Claire closed her eyes for 1 second. "He told me he would," she said. "Did you believe him?" "I believed he'd run out of other options," she said. Same result. She ended the call. Nathan was watching her. "It's done," he said. "The legal part is started," she said. "Done takes months. You know what I mean." She did. The acute part, the part that had required her to be precisely who she used to be for 22 hours straight, operating on instinct and experience, and the specific knowledge that nobody else in the room had, that part was finished. What came next was process. Process she could leave to other people. "I need to go somewhere," she said. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "The range," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "You need to shoot something right now." "No," she said. "I need to finish something I started yesterday morning." She drove to the range alone. It was mid-morning, and the Tuesday crowd was lighter than the weekend, but there were people there, a few regulars, a new group that Rick was setting up in lane 3 when she pushed through the door. The smell hit her the same way it always did, gunpowder and effort, and the particular democracy of a place where the target didn't care who you were before you pulled the trigger. Rick saw her from across the room. He stopped mid-sentence. His students looked at him, then followed his gaze. She walked to the far lane. Her lane. She set her case on the bench, unzipped it, and lifted the rifle out with both hands. Rick said something to his students in a low voice. She didn't hear what. She heard them move away from their lane and toward the benches against the wall, making space the way people make space when they understand, without being told that something is happening that they should watch. She heard Rick's footsteps approaching. He stopped a few feet away. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she said. He didn't say anything for a moment. She could feel him deciding something. "I talked to someone this morning," he said finally. "A buddy of mine retired, worked in logistics at Mayport for 12 years. He heard some things were moving." He paused. "He said a Navy senior chief was involved. Said she'd been out for 4 years, and she came back in to pull someone out of a very bad situation." Claire loaded the first round without responding. "He said she did it alone," Rick said. "No rank, no authority, no backup, just did it." "People do things," Claire said. "Not like that," Rick said. "Not most people." He paused. "I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the one I tried to give you at 4 in the morning, which was more about my conscience than about you." He stopped. "Yesterday morning I stood in this room and I made assumptions about who you were based on what I could see. I was wrong on every count, and I said it out loud in front of people, which made it worse." She adjusted her position at the bench. "You've apologized," she said. "More than once." "I know. I'm not sure once is enough." "Once is enough if you mean it." He was quiet for a moment. "I mean it." She looked up at him. She held his eyes the same way she had yesterday, 3 seconds direct no performance. But the quality of what passed between them this time was different. Yesterday it had been a warning. Today it was something more like recognition. "I know you do," she said. She put on her ear protection. She looked downrange at the target. And then from the wall, one of Rick's students, the youngest one, the kid named Tolly, who had looked through the scope yesterday with that rearranged expression, said something. Not loudly, almost to himself, but into a room that had gone quiet enough to carry it. "My dad talked about a sniper," Tolly said. "From his deployment, he was in 2nd Recon. He said there was a woman who made a shot nobody else could have made. He said she stayed on a ridge when the mission was already over because someone wasn't out yet." He paused. "He never knew her name, but he described her hands, said she loaded with her left hand and checked with her right, always in the same order." The room was silent. Claire's hands were still on the rifle. Left hand loading, right hand checking, always in the same order. She didn't turn around. She breathed in once, breathed out. She fired. The shot hit dead center. She fired 4 more times with the same rhythm, the same breath, the same absolute stillness at the core of the motion that had nothing to do with performance and everything to do with the fact that this was simply what she was, not what she used to be, not what she'd tried to stop being, but what she was underneath the 4 years and the small house and the careful, quiet life she'd built on top of it. When she lowered the rifle, Tolly had walked to the viewing scope. He looked through it. He turned around. His face had the expression of someone who has just confirmed something they needed confirmed. "1 hole," he said. The room didn't speak. Rick looked at the scope, then at Claire. "His name is Tolly," Rick said quietly. "His father's name is Marcus. He was in 2nd Recon, 2011. Claire looked at the target downrange. Marcus Tolly, 2nd Recon, 2011. She had a name for the ridge now. She'd had a face for years. She remembered every face, but the name had lived in a classified file she'd never had access to. She'd pulled Daniel Ramos out that night, and she'd covered their exit, and she'd provided suppression fire from a position she should not still have been in, and she'd made a shot at distance and in the dark that she'd never written down and had never told anyone about. 2 men. Both of them had sent their sons into uniform. Both of those sons had needed something in the last 48 hours that the institutions around them could not provide, and both of them had ended up connected to a woman who had spent 4 years trying to convince herself she was finished. She set the rifle down on the bench. She took off her ear protection. She turned around and looked at Tolly. He was 20-something, lean, with the posture of someone still new to the military habit of occupying space with intention. He was looking at her with the expression of a person standing at the edge of something they don't quite know how to cross. "Your father came home," she said. Tolly swallowed, nodded. "That's enough," she said. "That was always enough." He nodded again. His jaw was tight. She picked up her rifle case and her duffel, and she walked to the door. She pushed it open, and the morning air came in bright and ordinary and indifferent to everything that had just happened inside. Behind her, she heard Rick Mercer say something to his class. She didn't hear what. She didn't need to. She stood outside in the parking lot for a moment. She thought about the 2 chairs at the table in her small rented house. She thought about the shelf of rarely opened technical books and the 3 Tuesday mornings a week that she'd been protecting like they were the thing keeping her together. She thought about the specific shape of the life she'd built around the premise that she was done. That the best thing she could do for everyone, including herself, was to be still and be quiet, and let the operational years recede into the past where they belonged. She thought about Eddie standing at attention on a sidewalk outside a federal building with a receipt in his hand. She thought about Nathan's voice when she'd told him she was going in. The specific quality of relief underneath his professionalism, like a man who had been holding a door open for a very long time and had finally heard footsteps on the other side. She thought about Holloway calling Whitfield voluntarily at 09:30 because he had run out of options that didn't require him to be something worse than he already was. She thought about 5 shots and 1 hole and a room that went silent. She put her rifle case in the truck. She sat in the driver's seat for a moment with her hands in her lap. Not on the wheel, just sitting with the particular clarity that comes after a long and necessary thing is finished, and the next thing has not yet begun. Then she picked up the burner and called Nathan. He answered on the first ring. "It's done," she said. "I know," he said. Whitfield's office confirmed everything is moving. "That's not what I mean," she said. A pause. "I know," he said again, quieter this time. "I know that's not what you mean." She looked through the windshield at the range building. "I've been trying to disappear for 4 years," she said, "and I've been doing it in a place where I shoot 5 rounds 3 times a week." She paused. "That's not disappearing, Nathan. That's waiting." He didn't say anything. "I don't know what comes next," she said. "I'm not saying I'm back in. I'm not saying anything formal. I'm just saying—" She stopped, breathed. "I'm saying I'm done pretending that the best version of me is the one that asks nothing of herself." Nathan's voice, when it came, was steady and warm and entirely without drama. "I know," he said. I've been waiting for you to figure that out. Don't make it a thing, she said. I'm not making it anything, he said. I'm just answering the phone. She ended the call. She sat for one more moment in the quiet of the truck cab, alone, the way she'd been alone for 4 years, but differently alone. Not the alone of someone hiding, but the alone of someone who has finished one thing and hasn't yet started the next, which is not emptiness. It's space. Then she started the truck. She drove back toward the small house with the 2 chairs at the table, and she thought about what the next conversation with Whitfield might look like, and what Eddie's deposition would require, and whether Torres would be okay at Pendleton, now that the pressure had lifted, and about a 22-year-old kid named Tolly, who had looked through a scope and seen one hole where 5 rounds had been, and turned around with the expression of someone whose father's story had just become real to him, in a way it had never been before. She drove, and she did not feel finished. She felt for the first time in 4 years like someone standing at the beginning of something rather than the end of it. She had been mocked in a room full of strangers. She had been called sweetheart. She had been dismissed and underestimated, and warned off, and told that her quiet life was the correct and appropriate shape for the rest of her story. She had loaded 5 rounds. She had fired them through one hole, and then she had gone to work. Senior Chief Claire Maddox had not come back from anything. She had never been gone. She had simply been waiting for the moment that proved it. That moment had arrived on a Tuesday morning at a civilian shooting range, announced by a man who thought her silence was weakness, and she had answered it the only way she knew how, with absolute precision, with complete calm, and with the quiet, unshakable certainty of a woman who had always known exactly who she was and had simply been waiting for the world to catch up.